When I think about my life, I picture it as a colorful collage. Little bits and bobs that I picked up from all the different countries that I lived in, each piece becoming another part of myself. I feel like a scrapbook is a perfect visual metaphor for a third culture kid like me. And that is why I created the TCK Scrapbook. Hi everyone, this is your host Oleander Jeoung. I think a great place to start is to talk about what a third culture kid is. To borrow Pollock and Von Regen's words, a third culture kid is a person who has spent a significant part of his or her developmental years outside the parent's culture. The TCK builds relationships to all of the cultures while not having full ownership in any. If you're never sure how to answer the question, where are you from? Then congratulations, you're probably also a third culture kid. I personally always ask people if they want the long answer or the short answer. For the short answer, I say I was born in South Korea but spent half of my life in the US and 2 years in Wales. And the long answer ends up to be around 2 minutes long. It's a whole spiel about my life and the places I lived. I have met and interviewed several other ATCKs, and based on what they've told me, it seems like a lot of us have different answers for different situations. And it really is a difficult question to answer because people can mean different things, like the place that you grew up at, the place you're living at right now, the place you were born, or the place you stayed the longest. You don't have one answer for that when you grow up in multiple countries. I'd like to share Sid's answer because he perfectly captures the struggle of defining your identity as an adult third culture kid.
When anyone asks me where I'm from, I have had this dilemma in my life of where I come from. So whenever I'm meeting Indian people, I say I'm from India. Whenever I'm meeting people from outside, I usually say I'm a cosmopolitan because cosmopolitan means a citizen of the world. I can move anywhere, I can be not thinking about it, because if you think about it on a different scale of, let's say, finding your identity of where you're coming from, it always has been a juggle, like a cosmonaut all the time of just figuring out where do you come from. It kind of is like an identity crisis going on. It's like, oh, if I don't belong here, I belong here. And even they don't accept it. So it kind of has been just a up and down graph of just figuring out where you come from. That's why I say, I come from everywhere.
You know, I've read somewhere that for TCKs, home is nowhere and everywhere all at the same time. And that really resonated with me. I was born in South Korea, but I'm more used to the American culture. But that doesn't mean I'm Korean American because I'm still technically Korean. Like, I was in the US on a visa, and that sense of I'm only here temporarily really differentiates my experience from an actual Korean American. But that in-between status also means that I'm not afraid to move to a different country. Any place can be my home. Mustafa also shared that sentiment of not feeling really connected to a singular place and wanting a more diverse environment.
I used to really like I was in an international school in Kosovo. That's where I started going to school. And after coming back to Turkey, it was a bit difficult just like interacting with only one type of person, I guess, a person from the same ethnicities all around. So I think that was like major difficult, not necessarily a difficulty, but I liked having people from all different backgrounds in it. That wasn't there in Turkey. Yeah, like looking back at it, I don't remember any like outbreak. Oh fuck, I don't want to go. But coming back to Turkey, I do remember not liking it much. Yeah. I was missing the diversity. I always wanted to leave, but there was no plan to leave. But I also didn't feel like I belonged there. Like, you hear people talking about, oh, I miss home so much, I miss this, I miss that. I don't really experience that much. I have no home. I don't really care about that. Maybe because that was how I grew up, it doesn't really affect me.
One thing that really surprised me about Mustafa was that he told me that he didn't really experience culture shock or reverse culture shock. And I feel like that really shows how each TCK's experience is different. I personally experienced it when I went back to South Korea, and I remember how difficult it was to adjust to this culture that was supposedly mine. The biggest challenge for me though was language. My parents are Korean, so I did know the basics, but when I went back to Korea, I was homeschooled for half a year just so that I can actually learn how to read and write Korean. I remember the first few years were pretty tough because I had a hard time communicating with people. Santosh and Julie actually had some really insightful things to say about this topic.
After I went to Oman, I kind of started to speak primarily in English rather than my native language, mother tongue. And because of that, I noticed that most of the way I speak, the jokes I said, the songs I sing, everything has changed. So when I went back to India for like a few years, here and there, I couldn't find myself connecting with people that much. Especially when they speak, especially when they speak the native language, they say some jokes. I'm like, okay, cool. I understand it, but cool. Songs, they're like all hyped up about a song, and I'm like, okay, that's also cool, So though that type of a thing always kept this distance between us, so I couldn't really connect. But when I went back, and when I went back to Oman, I would meet my friends. I would like, oh yeah, that song we listened to, that's cool. Yeah, I know. They sing together,
I feel that it's easier for him to communicate with people who are not Indians than Indians. Because I feel that when he communicates with someone from outside of India, he just communicates with a person, right? But when he communicates with someone who is from India and, have this upbringing that he doesn't have, I feel that in a way, it almost feels like you can relate, but you're not fully related. I don't know about him, but I almost feel like sometimes you might feel that you are an imposter, that you look like this and you behave like that and you like the same kind of food, but maybe, maybe you're not fully that. So I think that's kind of a challenge for them, but at the same time, it's also a good thing for them because they do feel that, it's a chance for them to explore more, a chance for them to feel more. You don't define yourself in one pot of gold, I guess.
Julie's comment was really interesting because personally for me, I do find it more difficult to connect with Koreans. And I think it's because there's this set expectation of, oh, you're Korean, you look Korean, so you'll probably act like you're Korean. But I don't. And that's one reason why I found Korea to be one of the hardest countries for me to adapt to. But after that experience, I feel like it became so much easier for me to handle culture shock and adjusting to new countries. I met up with Shauna, a college counselor, and she delved into much more detail about the complexities of cultural adjustment.
Very commonly, international students do experience culture shock. I think there's the excitement of being an international student and the goals and anticipation and a honeymoon stage when people first arrive. But people talk about lots of adjustment to the culture and understanding cultural norms. We talk about learning shock, so the adjustment to studying in a different country, in a different post-secondary institution. So a common thing, people may feel like they're the only person who's feeling this. And so to realize this is normal, this is common, so for people to be able to talk about their experiences, I happen to have put on the board here this W model of culture shock, and I think the counseling strategy is called psychoeducation. So educating people on common psychological changes that can happen. So I use this teaching strategy all the time. I've heard of a W model of culture shock or a U model of culture shock. I like this one because students seem to identify with it. So we talk about common stages, and at the culture shock stage, rarely people can return to their home country. It would look like anxiety or depression or stress, like it's just too much. And it matters on the person's personality, how much they've traveled before. So this is where TCK kids and adults have an advantage probably because they've traveled before and probably may speak multiple languages. What can happen, even after people initially adjust, they still may feel a sense of longing for their home country. That's called mental isolation. I'm thinking of some students I've met, they said, I've lived in Canada for 10 years. I like living in Canada, but I have a deep longing for my home country. I miss my culture. I miss my family. So I think that's where it may be different for TCKs. That I think you're more of an expert with TCKs than I am, Ollie. But I also think there may not be that deep-rooted missing, you know, where I was born or my home country. And it's my understanding that the people, TCKs may identify more with people and feel more of a sense of belonging with groups of people and friends and new family and chosen family as opposed to a place, as opposed to a home country.
And it's true. Every ATCK that I've spoken to told me that they identify more with people than a place. And I think that also translates to one of the biggest strengths of TCKs, the ability to adapt and empathize across different cultural contexts. Santosh actually had this really insightful thing to say about TCKs being a bridge to other cultures. Since we have experience with seeing from all these different perspectives, we're able to help people from different cultures connect and relate to each other. Sure, we may be in between, we may not fit into one box, but I feel like that's such an amazing trait. Natalia, an international student support specialist, had some really good advice regarding this.
I would say that you find more unique people in third culture kids than in just a regular society, that they just, because we just move along with the norm is. And when you have so many norms, like you put things into a blender, you come out with some unique smoothie. So yeah, just embrace that uniqueness, and that will make you feel special among feeling different. Because it does tend to get lonely when you feel different, but when you embrace that differences as a uniqueness, it's easier to move on.
And there we have reached the last page of the TCK Scrapbook. I think the biggest takeaway is that every TCK experience is unique in itself. We're all different, and we should embrace that uniqueness. As we close this chapter, let's remember to embrace our diversity and keep building connections in our global community. Thanks for joining me on this journey. This has been the TCK Scrapbook.